All right. Steve, what do you got this week?
Yeah, well, I had listened to a podcast by Marlene Gaybauer and Greg Lambert, the Geek and Review podcast,
My
which is
second favorite
always
podcast.
really enjoy listening to, and was fortunate enough to be on every now and then. But they interviewed a woman who was the head of a practice group um, in a law firm, and the interesting part about it was this woman did not have a JD. She was a business person. Um, and it struck me they sort of laid out the responsibilities of practice group heads, and for that matter the chairman of a firm. I mean, it's develop an overall strategy, advance business development, make sure the work is distributed equitably, find lawyers that are having trouble and come up with a way to help them. When I was a practice group head, I also had to monitor the financial performance of the practice group and come up with budgets, and at the same time practice law. And kind of therein lies the rub. Um, First, most of those, if not all of those, except for practicing law, are not things that lawyers are particularly qualified to do. Business people, on the other hand, typically are. Um, what we are qualified to do is practice law, right? And so you start putting lawyers, and it's often lawyers with very big books of business in a lot of law firms. Let's face it, that's who carries the cloud and becomes a practice group leader or firm chair. So you take these very qualified lawyers, force them into a role where now they're going to have to try to do something they're really not trained to do very well, uh, and then tell them at the same time keep practicing law. That's kind of what I was told. So now you've got this kind of choice. Do you spend your time working on firm matters, trying to do something you don't really know how to do, or do you spend most of your time doing what you really know how to do, which is practicing law and develop business and that sort of thing? And in many cases, the answer becomes obvious. Most of these leaders spend more time and energy practicing law and less time managing the law firm. Or conversely, they decide we'll spend more time trying to do what we don't know how to do, which is managing a law firm, managing a very robust business, and less time doing what I was once doing, which was very qualified to do. And as a result, you take out of circulation, a key revenue generating person, to try to cram them into this role of business management. None of which makes a whole lot of sense until you start thinking about, well, what's the business model for most law firms? And it is a partnership with no non-lawyer ownership. And so, management lawyers in a law firm are typically like, well, you know, you may be the chief executive officer, but I'm the person that's got everything at risk. I mean, it's my partnership, it's my money, it's my debt. And as one of my partners, who I will not name, used to say, when he was hit with some bureaucratic requirements, he would say, "I'm not going to do that. I pay your salary, for God's sake." So it kind of perpetuates itself into this sort of lackluster management of so many law firms, and it just struck me as I was thinking through those qualifications. They're all of a practice group head or a firm chair, or even somebody running a legal department in a corporation. I mean, they're business responsibilities and business obligations and things that business people know how to do, and yet we sort of keep plugging along. Eh, we can do. We're lawyers. We can do this. That business stuff's easy, right? We can handle that. So I thought it was just kind of an interesting sort of phenomenon that, at least in this one firm, they had decided to make a business person responsible for a practice group, and seemed to be working pretty well.
Is there a parallel there to the rise of legal ops and corporate legal departments? I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
I think one of the reasons legal ops has
yeah,
has become such a powerful force in the legal world is that they are business people. They understand processes and workflows, and they are able to bring those to a legal department And they're not they don't have to be lawyers. Maybe some of them are, and probably some of them are, but it's all about bringing business methods to the running of the legal department.
And I postulated in the post that a business person could run very successfully a legal department, and where the lawyers would report to the business person, because many of the things that legal departments do, process management, human relationships, determining the best fit for various types of pieces of work, are things that could be better done by a business person. And if that were to occur, it gets you out of this sort of I want to say maybe good old boy network, where so many general counsel come from law firms and tend to adopt that as models. And in fact, there was an article that just a few minutes ago I was reading that many of the corporations are hiring fewer law firms, but the ones that they're hiring are the ones that they have long-term relationships with. And from a cost analysis, that may not be the best law firms for them to be hiring, right? Because they're very expensive and they're very well known, and you're sort of over lawyering many of the problems, unless they're bet the company problems. So I've often thought, what would happen if you had a business person running a law firm who would look at something like that and say, I'm not sure our mix and who we're using these very expensive law firms is quite right. It doesn't make business sense, right? So,
right.
Maybe someday it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Someone who understands law firms running a law firm, understands business running a law firm. No. That's crazy talk. Come on now. No. They because what would a lawyer running a law firm do other than complain that they didn't go to law school to do this job? That's 90% of their conversation.
Yeah.
But you make a great point. Now, what I actually thought was interesting about that, well, all of it, but the thing that I zeroed in on was your point about clients transitioning back to law firms that they have long-term relationships with, which is a different narrative than we've been telling
right
5 years ago. Like, I remember writing a bunch of stories about 5 years ago about the professionalization of clients and how they were walking away from the long-term relationship and increasingly taking a real hard look at, hey, this isn't bet the company. I'm going to hire this smaller firm that is cheaper and more efficient, and the jobs and beef up my own in-house and take a lot of this stuff in-house, and therefore not do that. And that was really the theme a few years ago. But things have changed a little bit. Conditions are different, and maybe they're running home to the old ways.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised to see that too. And again, it makes, except in a bet the company case, it just doesn't make economic sense. I mean, you don't go out and buy Cadillacs to deliver goods in or something. I don't. It's just but that's the legal profession.
Yeah. Well,
did I cut out at any point there?
No.
Okay, good. Well, you all cut out audio, and I was like, oh, did something break? But apparently it wasn't that. Anyway.
No.
I just want to, before we move on from this topic, I do think it's interesting that, so we're starting to see law schools address this on the technologist front. So with courses and tracks, not quite tracks, but close to tracks on developing skills in legal technology through law school. And I haven't seen that same development of business skills other than through clinics. And I'm wondering if undergrad and law schools and business schools are putting their heads together to develop these pathways for professionals for law firms. It makes sense to me. I don't know that it's really happening. I'm seeing lots of really expensive LLMs and other advanced trainings, like you're paying for a law degree to not make as much as a lawyer working in a law firm. But I'm not seeing, the law schools really rethink how these specialties in law practice or in running a legal business might play out.
Yeah, it's interesting, Molly. I have a nephew, and he went to Penn, and he got a combined MBA and computer engineering degree designed to do just what you've been describing. And now he works for Google, and probably makes more money than all of us put together. But in any event, I thought that was interesting. That was 10, 15 years ago that was being done. And like you,
Yeah.
I've not heard of that. And it's really, it's kind of sad in a way, because a lot of the lawyers that really need that kind of business training end up working for small firms or going solo, and they're just thrown out there. Many of them don't even understand financial statements and those sorts of things. And it's a real shame that most of the lawyers that come out of law schools end up in those kinds of jobs as opposed to big law, which has enough problems in that arena of its own. But we're really depriving them of a way to sustain themselves in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I mean,
there are a couple
Enron-
of law schools that offer joint JD MBA degrees, but they're not a track to run a law firm. It's a different kind of a track.
I was going to say Enron had big law lawyers, so even they don't understand how financial statements are written sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or maybe they really did.
in our next issue, we're actually like kind of looking at that issue of like whether or not, because obviously, I mean, most big firms, they have like some kind of like CFO or some kind of person there, I don't know, maybe with a law degree, maybe, but usually on salary, who's there to like, with run the financials of a firm and whatnot. And obviously, with a lot of small firms and solos, the attitude is, well, I can't afford to hire a CFO, or what's the point? This is my practice. I need to do it myself. And, ultimately it's like, okay, well, do you really want to spend all that time trying to learn how to run a business, and probably, takes time away from your practice, and maybe even, detract from it, and maybe, you don't do it as well as you as a professional could? Or do you want to just bite the bullet and hire a CFO? And so, I mean, obviously, like, like more and more small firms are starting to do it, and I think it's probably worthwhile to at least look at it. And obviously, like like look at what's happening in Utah and Arizona. I mean, hopefully at some point, we'll see some results of like these new structures, and how they can kind of bridge that gap, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that would make a huge difference, because now if you could have non-lawyer ownership and business people in that role, then that everybody comes to the table sort of equal. We're all in this together, as opposed to lawyers over here whose money is all at stake, and business people over here whose all they have at stake is their salary, which is not insignificant, but still it's a little different than being responsible for profits and revenues and debt. So
Yeah, for my podcast that's coming out on Monday, I interviewed Andrew Ballheimer, who is the former global managing partner of Allen and Overy, who just joined the board of Factor, the ALSP Factor, the managed services firm Factor. And a lot of people kind of wrote about that move as perhaps symbolizing this sort of bridge between traditional law practice and new so-called new law. But he talked a lot about kind of the symbiotic relationship perhaps between ALSPs and traditional law firms, where they can work together to serve the client, kind of in the way, Steve, that you were talking about, where they come to the law firm for the high end, the thinking stuff, the really skilled stuff, but then the execution of it, you work with a managed services firm to do it. Like a great example was Allen and Overy and Factor worked together on this LIBOR remediation project. So, the Allen and Overy attorneys kind of did the big level thinking about what needed to be done there. But when it came down to the sort of rote mechanical execution of that, it's not just rote and mechanical, but to the more commoditized execution of that, then you work with a managed services firm to kind of carry it all out, and the clients benefit because they get that high level legal skill, but then they don't also pay an arm and a leg to a big firm to do all the execution of it.
Yeah, and I think
Victoria,
that's going
did
to
you
be
have something to add? I noticed you had.
I'm sorry.
It feels like it was like
15, 20 minutes ago, but just kind of
I'm
like
sorry.
what Joe and Steve were saying about kind of, these corporations, corporate legal departments say like, hey, we want more efficiency, technology. And I was speaking to a source earlier this week, and he said, yeah, these corporate legal departments make those announcements, but then in a lot of corporate legal departments, they provide like autonomy, and like individual in-house lawyers can make those decisions on who actually works on certain matters. And a lot of times when you look at who they're hiring, it's not necessarily that they're efficient, or they're not necessarily following like diversity announcement that the corporation makes. And it's just kind of like, oh, we had this previous relationship with them. And that kind of trickles down into if law firms see that, hey, I don't really need to be efficient, I just need to have this relationship with the client, and that gets me the work. Then it's kind of like, okay, we see these corporations, they're saying they want more efficiency, but when law firms are actually getting kind of creative and using technology, if they're not being rewarded by it, by actually, getting that work, then you'll kind of see like, you won't see as much like evolution in law firms and corporate legal departments, because the GCs aren't demanding of their in-house lawyers like, hey, no, I want you to look at this other firm that's pitching, that's trying to get our work more closely, looking at them more closely.